Welcome to Serious Catholic Leadership, the place where you can come for clear answers and straightforward advice on all topics related to working for the Catholic Church. No fluff stuff. I'm your host, Zach Morgan. I've been working for the church for about 17 years.
And I'm Tom Timmons, and I've been working for the church for the last 15 years in the field of fundraising and development. We're going to jump into today's topic, which is about just wage. The Catholic Church defines 4 sins that cry out to God for vengeance: willful murder, the sin of sodomy, oppression of the poor, and last but not least, defrauding workers of their wages. Zach, if you just want to jump in here and unpack this a little bit. I mean, the idea of just wage and defrauding an employer of their wages is one of these 4 grave sins, and I think probably often overlooked.
Absolutely. I think that if we think of this as an institutional sin with a parallel toward mortal sin in our own lives, it makes it a lot easier for us to grapple with. On an institutional level, we have this occurrence of people feeling like they are being taken advantage of, the same way that we take advantage whenever we commit sins ourselves. And at the end of the day, when we commit those sins, we have one of 2 options. We can either repent and seek forgiveness, which with it comes a call to try to change our lives, or we can shrug our shoulders and walk off. On an institutional level, when we realize that we are engaging in practices that marginalize or defraud our employees, we have an obligation to either answer the same way. We'll either say, yes, this is something that we need to confront and to change, or we can shrug our shoulders. And unfortunately, I think a lot of times the church decides to shrug her shoulders because those who work in the church see their job more as mission-based rather than as a true occupation.
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think on that note, I think a lot of times the challenge that we find in the church is that we have these wonderful ordained clergy who are leading these organizations, leading these churches, and they're, in a sense, married to their vocation. A lot of times, lay people are often married, and their vocation are their spouses and their families. So I think sometimes we see that the employer holds up their employee to the same standard which they've undertaken, which is professing vows to the church. And that's not the case. The job for the lay person is not their primary vocation, and it should not be number one. It's important. It's an ends to a means. It's to provide for their family, but it's not number one.
Absolutely. And I think what happens is because there is that feeling that we are walking as an employee who is not religious, I'm walking into an employer who is, and so I feel like I have an obligation to take whatever pay they can offer me because, well, that's what they have. That's in the budget. That's what they have. Even though my time may be more valuable, or I may need it for my own, for the efficacy of my home life, I may need to make more money. Sometimes we feel like, well, you just got to bite the bullet and hope that I get those raises in the future and because you got to start somewhere, or you got to meet the church where she is. Instead of finding ways to talk about what that wage really should look like, or finding creative ways to make that wage more attainable. Yeah. So, and once we have that wage, we got to think about, like you said, is our vocation this job, which typically for an employee it's not. So this job helps me not only promote the mission of the church, but gives me time to go home to where my real mission is, where my vocation is, which leads us to that question of having time off. And do you want to talk to that, Tom?
Absolutely. So, and I think it's so important today to have time off for mental health, for just physical health, for just, a break from the day-to-day workplace. And oftentimes, too often, time off is looked down upon, vacation time, putting in for vacation. Well, this isn't really a good time to take a vacation. We've got XYZ going on. Well, when is a good time to take a vacation? Especially a lot of times around the holidays, a lot of nonprofits have this, push at the end of the year, to really hit their marks, hit all their goals. Well, the end of the year is also Christmas, one of the most holy, sacred times of the year. So we have to find a really healthy balance here. And I think all too often, not only in the Catholic world, but in the secular world too, people are often afraid to take time off. They feel like maybe I'm going to be let go if I take time off. Or they realize, hey, if I take time off, my workload's going to be 3-4 times what it is already when I get back. And I can't put myself through that. So how do you delegate tasks appropriately so that people can take time off? And then how do you, take that time off and not, still be kind of on call? And that's happened to me in the past where, hey, I'm taking time with my family, and the phone's ringing, the emails are coming in, and it's expected that I respond. It's expected that I jump into a meeting on a vacation with my family, which again is earned and should be used for my well-being and the well-being of my family. So yeah, I think the just wage, there's several components to this where it's not just salary. That's probably the biggest component, but then it's also quality of work life, home life balance, and I think that's where vacation and time off comes into play quite a bit.
Yeah, and the church is one of the first institutions to talk about the fact that you need to have home work-life balance. You'll hear a priest talk about the fact that, are you spending time with your families? Are you spending time from the pulpit? But the question is, are they having those same conversations with their staff back in their staff meetings, and or just on day-to-day parish life? So what ends up happening is that feeling that there's this disparity in wage, and this feeling that I want to take time off, but I can't take it the way I want or when I want, leads ultimately to a feeling of not being valued as an employee. And that's probably one of the biggest things that we can defraud our employees of in the church, is defrauding them of their humanity. Ultimately, we're making them feel more like tools than they are like people. And so when we talk about defrauding wage, that's one aspect of it. But another thing is defrauding them of their dignity. And we have to make sure that when we have policies and we enact things like how we take our breaks, do we have lunch breaks or not? And are they paid or not? So I'm at work and I'm eating, but if somebody pops their head in and asks me a question while I'm eating, I'm still going to answer, not hold my finger up and tell them, sorry, I'm not on the clock. But so that 40-hour work week becomes a 45-hour work week because I don't get my lunch break paid. Or maybe you do get your lunch break paid, but you punch the clock and you're sitting at your desk because you're efficient enough that you've already done all your work. So now that we understand how disparity of wage and feeling like you can't go into your vacation or your sick time, PTO, however your individual institution covers it, ultimately that feeling of not being valued starts to come out. And it's one of the big reasons why most people leave the church. Not leave the church, but leave employment in the church. So there's got to be some remedies. And I think that we have a few that I'm excited to talk about. And Tom, why don't you start us off when we talk about applying to this job at this church in that interview process?
Right, absolutely. So right when we get started at a new job, and I'm sure there's some people here that are transitioning or trying to land that next job, I think oftentimes we put too much of a focus on securing the job and not enough of a focus on the just wage or the appropriate time off. And when that happens, I think what I often see is this vicious cycle where, hey, you're working a job for 2 years and now you're tired of it. Your employer's tired of you asking for time off, and you're back looking for another job instead of that very first time where you meet your future employer at the interview, be transparent with them. Say, hey, I've got a family. They're my primary vocation, and I, you know, intend to take my time off, my vacation. You don't lead with that, but as the interview is going on and it's going well, I think it's perfectly acceptable to mention that, to kind of level the playing field so that you and your employer are all on the same page day one, and it comes as no surprise when you take your vacation time. So I think that's, an important point. If you're, transitioning, if you're looking for a new job, be transparent, be open, be honest. Try to make sure that you're justly compensated for, your qualifications. And if that's not the case, if you're in the middle of your employment right now, and you want to tackle how to stay compensated well, there's obviously the review process, and Zach, you can tell us a little bit more about that.
Absolutely. So once you're in that position, once you have either accepted the job, or if you are listening to this podcast and you find yourself in a job where you're a little bit frustrated because you feel like there's no way now that you're in it to voice those concerns that you wish you would have voiced during that interview process, an easy way to kind of balance those scales, or have an opportunity to have a conversation that's more intent on your individual contribution, is to really insist on having employee reviews and ask for them quarterly. We have a short-term memory, especially institutionally. We don't remember what we did 6, 8, 12 months ago, but the last quarter we can remember, like, what were my goals? What did I succeed in? What did I not do well in? Where do I feel like I needed more help? And where do I feel like I was treated unjustly? And so if you have that quarterly review process, it's a time not only for your employer to say, hey, here are our expectations, and you're meeting them great, or maybe you're not meeting them as well as we thought we would, but it gives that safe environment for you to talk and say, hey, Father, when I took this job, the very last line I noticed that, and this happens with almost every church employee, there's this statement that says, and duties as assigned by pastor. So I've got all my normal work and then anything that you give me. And I just want to say, hey, what you've been giving me lately is actually more than I'm able to do in a 40-hour week. Or, hey, Father, I actually have a little bit more free time this quarter because my programs are a little bit lighter. If you need someone to help out, I'm willing to take on some extra stuff. So it gives a time to be able to actually leverage your time and your other coworkers' time really well to help each other out. So it doesn't feel like such a combative environment. And that goes right into what I was saying earlier about punching the clock versus completing a job. I'm sure there are times, Tom, where you felt like at the end of the week you'd had all your work done and you wish you could just leave. But if you would have left, would you have gotten paid?
Well, maybe I've gotten paid, but I probably would hear about it Monday morning. Why?
So do you want to speak to that?
Why did you leave early? Yeah. So, I think exactly. We all, if we're doing our work and we're doing it well, and we get it done efficiently, there shouldn't be anything wrong with leaving a little early on a Friday, or getting out a little early on a given day. And it should actually be, I think, encouraged, because if you're doing your job well, and I think a lot of times, we've all worked with individuals who do their jobs well. We all have worked with individuals who waste time at work, who, spend time on Facebook or Instagram. And if that's not you, and I hope it's not, if that's not you wasting time and you do your job and do it well, then what's so wrong about being compensated with a little extra time off that week, and encouraged even to clock out a little early, but still receive a full week's pay. And I think for part-time employees, this is even a more difficult topic, because full-time, it's like, well, you're gonna get your salary regardless, and you're going to work a lot of weeks more than 40 hours. But then that hourly employee often has that difficult task to say, hey, well, if I want to get paid my full pay, I'm going to have to be here, even if that means I'm just literally sitting in my chair doing nothing for a few hours at the end of my week. Why? What is the point in that? How about let's treat these people with a little bit more dignity.
Well, let's reward efficiency. There is
Exactly.
nothing wrong with rewarding efficiency, whether you're a full-time employee or you're a part-time employee. And
Right.
but that's where we have kind of this backwards understanding, and a lot of times we don't know that another employee is as efficient as they are, because how often do you ever hear your immediate supervisor or father or one of the deacons, if you have deacons in your parish who have administrative roles, how often do you hear them giving those words of affirmation to your fellow employees? And I think one way of really making sure that people at the end of the day truly feel valued and that are receiving a just wage, even if you and I may not see our coworkers sitting in their seat and they still get their full pay, it's because we know exactly what they're doing, because we hear them being praised for their work. So words of affirmation are not just good for me as an individual to know, okay, I'm doing my job well. It's good for us to know as a whole that our coworkers are doing their jobs well. We may
Right.
think that they may be slacking off big time because we're not sitting in their office and we're not their direct report. But if the institution, if Father's really happy with their work and wants to reward them for being efficient, he should be free to do so. And if those words of affirmation are given readily amongst all employees from the top down, it makes it a whole lot easier to see even our coworkers' value as well.
Yes, absolutely. Right. And I think, and on that point, having, weekly staff meetings with the whole office, from highest paid, lowest paid, part-time, full-time, bringing everybody together, and affirming people publicly really helps to see everyone's worth in the office. And, maybe weekly staff meetings are done where you work. Does it include everyone on staff? I mean, I'm sure some churches or institutions it might not be possible, but at least maybe weekly, department meetings, where, if you have a larger office or a larger nonprofit or something like that that you work for, the importance of just, coming together as a team, and just hearing everybody's, joys, successes, struggles, professional, for the week, I think is so important. And you start not only, feeling valued as an employee, you start, I think, treating others, maybe even those that you don't really always see eye to eye with or get along with, or, you maybe have different political views. You start seeing them as people and treating them a little bit more with dignity and respect, than, rushing to judgment, which we shouldn't do,
Yeah. Well,
regardless, especially as Catholics.
well, and every parish is trying to live out sort of Father's pastoral plan for the parish. We always see our little piece of how we fit into the equation, but oftentimes we don't see how everybody else's pieces fit together. And I find that there are very few parishes that can actually sit down and can verbalize or vocalize what they think Father's pastoral plan even is. So a lot of times they're working in their department just as, well, how should I run this? And they're answering questions and doing their best. But if they had that understanding of the whole picture, if they understood how their piece of the puzzle fit into the whole picture, it makes it a lot easier to, when you have those times where you have to give a little more than you would normally want to, or have to ask for help that you might even be a little ashamed to have to ask for, so that you're receiving the help that you need to make sure that your job is getting done properly, so that you feel like your wage is just, and that your time off is justified, because you're giving the best that you can. But if you don't know what everybody else is doing, if you can't verbalize what Father's pastoral plan for your parish is and how your work fits into that, the easy solution to that is having that weekly staff meeting and then asking questions where everybody hears the same answer. So if you are experiencing that, it's going to be a whole lot easier to have a workplace that truly does make the individuals in that workplace feel valued.
Right.
But that leads
Yeah.
us at the end of the day to the one who's leading that meeting. And the person leading that meeting has to embody a trait that I think Tom and I will be using over and over and over during our podcast, and that's empathy, because empathetic leaders are the best leaders. And Tom, why don't you end our time together by speaking to like empathy in leadership?
Right. Yeah. And I think, if you listen to any leadership guru or podcast, I think the number one theme you're always going to come back to is this topic of empathy, and really empathy is what makes great leaders. It's what makes a great work environment. If you can be, empathetic as a leader, your whole office is going to thrive. And that's probably more important than any other qualification or skill that you might have when leading a team, whether secular or in the church. And, at one point in my career, I had come to the realization that, all of the good that I do in my job, all the, good that my coworkers do, it just pales in comparison to the value of my own life, the lives of my coworkers, my boss. And I think that concept of empathy and married with, dignity and value for the other is just so important in the Catholic workplace. Seeing each other as, not a means to an end, that, hey, we're all here to do this mission. And Father's really excited about accomplishing this mission. But, at the end of the day, if you treat, if Father treats his staff like they're disposable, then what's the point of the mission in the first place? So, it's so important to have empathy and dignity for the worker. And it's probably why we have encyclicals written on this topic in the church. But yeah, we're hoping that, through these podcasts, this time together, that, we can just instill just a little bit more encouragement and value in the Catholic workplace. You can follow us at seriouscatholicleadership.com or simply sirius.fm. And we're happy to join you for this time, and we're glad that you could listen. Please share with friends and support us on Patreon. And thank you so much for your time.
Absolutely. And we do this because we love our faith and we love working for the church. And our goal is to encourage each other and to encourage our leadership to be good stewards of our time and our talents. So thanks, Tom. It's good to see you.